Greetings. It is now Friday, February 9th, 2024. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is a special report, an analysis on Tucker Carlson's interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Quite a few people contacted me about this and wanted my opinion, and just about everybody's giving their opinion. First, I'm going to make a strong recommendation that you don't just listen to my report or anyone else's. You go in and watch the entire 2-hour interview yourself. You can get it on YouTube. You can get it at tuckercarlson.com. And if you go to BitChute and just type the word Tucker, there's probably 50 versions of it, or 50 different copies of it, I should say. Please watch it. Don't take anyone else's word for what is said. You have to be able to be willing to look at everything. 2 hours is not a lot of time for those of you who like to watch TV shows, play role-playing games or video games or other such useless pursuits in such difficult times. It's important to get the story yourself. Now, there's a lot of things that were covered. Among them, Boris Johnson nixing what would have been a peace treaty more than a year ago between Russia and Ukraine. A lot of other interesting things, the CIA blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. But I'll tell you, the big takeaway from that whole interview was the underlying reality that the United States is no longer the top dog in the world. Those days are gone. Those days are over forever. Vladimir Putin went into an awful lot about the history of Ukraine. He is a very educated man. He's one that knows his history, and he's not exactly an angel. I'm not going to put that label on him. But he does go into some realities that a lot of us understood. I mean, there was really nothing he was saying that surprised me. Let me tell you a little bit of background here. Back when the Cold War ended in 1991, those of us who were around and working and covering the story, so to speak, thought that, okay, it's over. Isn't that great? No more of this nuclear threat anymore between the USSR and the USA. We're going to have like a Marshall Plan, like we did after World War II to rebuild Europe. We're going to bring Russia into the modern world and help them get established and back on their feet and join the community of civilized, developed nations. That didn't happen. And for the likes of me, I didn't understand it, neither did a lot of my colleagues at the time. In fact, I remember hearing from some State Department people about a going-away party that happened, where one of their officials were going off to Russia for assignment in the immediate post-Cold War era, and as a gag, they gave him a fedora, a hat, one of those nice wide-brimmed hats, and the reason being he was going to have to look like a gangster because he'll be dealing with gangsters, and that's what happened. After the Soviet Union collapsed, it was not a nice time. A lot of people suffered. A lot of oligarchs came to power. A lot of criminal gangs came into being. It was a mess, and it could have been prevented, but we didn't do that. A lot of us thought NATO would be dissolved or restructured into something else. Oh, that's another thing Putin mentioned, that he had asked President Clinton if it would be a good idea to join NATO, and apparently it was turned down. It'll be interesting to see what the former president has to say about that. Now, the war with Ukraine, those of us who followed it, realize it started in 2014. Most people don't know that. They think it started in February of 2022. No, that's what pushed Russia into direct conflict. There was already a war going on for some years that resulted from a coup. It's a long story, and it's covered. And if you really want to dig up the facts, they've been there for quite some time. The mainstream media has not done that, though. So what does this mean? Well, the U.S. has, for whatever reason, and I can pretty much theorize it's about money, greed, and power, really pushed this thing to where it went. And all I'm going to say is this, that my concern is not the U.S. becoming a second-rate power. It's how journalism is being persecuted. People are talking about Mr. Carlson being subject to sanctions, possibly being prosecuted. We've come a long way downhill from the days when a journalist could seek out Osama bin Laden and meet him at a secret location and interview him, or for that matter, meeting Yasser Arafat back in the day when his people were doing some horrible things, or even Jane Fonda when she visited Hanoi as Americans were being killed at the hands of the North Vietnamese. The powers that be in the United States are very corrupt, and they are very scared, and they are very much into controlling a narrative that benefits them. Mr. Carlson did a pretty good job because he did what a reporter's supposed to do when you interview someone important. You ask them a question and let them talk. You'd be surprised how many journalists don't do that. They try to put words in people's mouths. He did interrupt Mr. Putin a couple of times, but he did so in a reasonable way. Now, I'm going to give one criticism to Mr. Tucker. At the end of the interview, he threw out a request that a journalist who's being held in Moscow right now under charges of espionage be released to him. One, I didn't see its relevance for the interview, and two, I thought it was a bad idea. Now, I don't know what interest Tucker has in that person. Journalists do get nabbed all the time, but they're almost always released privately. Putting a head of state on the spot to do something like that never works. However, if he had taken President Putin aside and said, wouldn't it be nice if we got this guy out? It's a story for another time. Journalists overseas are always accused of spying. That happened to me on several occasions, although I was never nabbed for it, and it never happened. A journalist, if you think about it, is sort of that way a spy is, except instead of gathering information and reporting it to several million people, a spy gathers it and reports it to one person or one government. So it's the same process. And there are some people in the intelligence world, I'm sure, that do masquerade as journalists. But I didn't particularly think that was a good idea on his part. And it did indicate something which I don't know if anyone's picked up on this, but it seems kind of obvious that Mr. Tucker Carlson has political ambitions, because that's the sort of thing politicians do. Getting people released and bringing them home. That's what politicians do. And I think that Mr. Carlson has definitely not reached the level of his ambition. I think he's going to be moving on to something much more ambitious in the near future. What it is, it'll be up to him to explain to us when it happens. Anyways, to reiterate, I urge everyone to watch the interview and then start thinking for yourself what's really going on here and start acting, because sitting on the sofa drinking beer and eating potato chips or Cheetos or something like that, watching the TV and being angry will accomplish nothing. And the next thing you know, you will not have the TV or the sofa or the beer or the snacks. You'll have nothing, because that's what this is all leading to. Anyways, I will be in touch again on Monday with a more detailed report of the goings-on this week. I'll be watching this story. It'll be interesting to see how Mr. Carlson is treated when he goes through Customs and Immigration upon returning to the United States, if he hasn't done so already. If you like what you hear, please consider a paid subscription. Please share this broadcast with others. I welcome feedback. You can reach me at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I can also be reached on X, which used to be known as Twitter. My handle there is MICCAMPEN, MICCAMPEN. Until my next report, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and good day.